Boy, this is rich. Kamala at an event in Pennsylvania. This is rich.
But the enemy within our country, Pennsylvania. He's talking about that he considers anyone who doesn't support him or who will not bend to his will an enemy of our country. It's a serious issue. He is saying that he would use the military to go after them. Think about this.
Think about what? He's not saying anybody who disagrees with him. Of course, that's a lie. Oh. He is saying people in this country illegally, particularly starting with those people in this country illegally who then have harmed other people in this country, whether they're legal or illegal. That's what mass deportation means. All of this business is just misdirection, as per usual, from a campaign and a candidate who is flailing. And let's just remember what their stated position is, despite Field Marshal Walls trying to twist out of it with Shannon Bream over the weekend on Fox.
You mean Mr. Knucklehead? Yes.
They want to silence people who disagree with them.
Right. They want to take away our First Amendment right to free speech.
I mean, Walls and Bream over the weekend, to be quite honest, I would have liked a little bit more from Shannon Bream on this.
Speech. You've said there's no guarantee to free speech for misinformation or hate speech. But first of all, Supreme Court very clear in a unanimous 2017 decision that hate speech is protected. That's the kind of stuff that needs to be protected, stuff none of us like to hear. But more importantly, who gets to decide on the issue of what misinformation is?
Look, the First Amendment is foundational. It's something I spent my whole life, the vice president, and I think most Americans are clear on this. The point being on this, we're seeing censorship coming in the form of book bannings in different places. We're seeing it attempts in schools. The issue on this is the hate speech and the protected hate speech. Speech that's aimed at creating violence, speech that's aimed at threats to individuals. And that's what we're talking about in this. And the decision on that, society decides on a lot of this. The idea of someone going on and threatening someone's life or a child's life online, I don't think any of your viewers think that is something that should be acceptable.
I mean, there's a distinction, you would say, though, between something like a threat and misinformation.
Oh, certainly. And that's what we're talking about. And I think the idea of making sure that folks understand, are good consumers of that, those are the decisions they make. But I've always defend your First Amendment rights, defend your right to disagree on every case. That robust discussion has to happen. And that's why I'm so opposed to book banning. That's why in Minnesota we banned the practice of book banning. Let you make the decision of what you're going to read, whether you find it objectionable or not. The difference is threats, that type of speech.
Okay.
That's not true. That's not what he said. Here's what Tim Walz actually said.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
Misinformation or hate speech around our democracy. You didn't say threats of violence. That's not speech.
No.
That runs afoul of the First Amendment. Everybody understands that. He's lying. And this is Kamala Harris, again, at an NAACP event a couple of years back. Her position.
And will put the Department of Justice of the United States back in the business of justice. We will double the Civil Rights Division and direct law enforcement to counter this extremism. We will hold social media platforms accountable for the hate infiltrating their platforms because they have a responsibility to help fight against this threat to our democracy. And if you profit off of...
I mean, they purposely conflate hate speech and threats of violence. And to be so sloppy is not being sloppy. It's indicative of their actual position. They're using hate speech as a cover, well, they're using violence like Tim Walz did with Shannon Bream. They're using that as a cover for their larger censorious agenda. And I mean, it's not just these two knuckleheads saying it. It's all of their allies, from Hillary Clinton to John Kerry to Bill Gates.
We should have free speech, but if you're inciting violence, if you're causing people not to take vaccines...
I mean, you could just stop right there.
Oh, my God, stop, please.
if you're causing violence or you're inciting people not to take vaccines or you're encouraging people to vote for the wrong candidate, they treat all of those examples as equivalent, and they're not. For more on all of this, we're pleased to be joined by Mike Braun, senator from Indiana and running for governor of Indiana. He's on the ballot on November 5th. Senator, future governor, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
There's been a lot of discussion in the Senate about social media companies. But I just want your perspective on this larger debate over being able to debate, because there really is a censorious strain in what is being promoted by the new Bolshevik Party.
It's funny, too, because what gets me is it's done with such a tone of moral superiority, in that whatever they believe in can only be the right thing. And then they're the ones dishing out words like racist, fascist, insurrectionist, all the inflammatory stuff that they'll tag you with if they disagree with anything that you're wanting to bring up as a point, and case is settled. To me, that is putting your finger on the narrative in a way that is really suffocating. And half the country sees that, senses it, and that, I think, is why they're in such a wobbly position going into November 5th, not to mention all the policies they try to promote that have put us into such a bad place as a country in general. And they think they can get by with it because they have the resources, and they think they can always spin the narrative to make it sensible, and I think they're falling short, and it's on display as we watch here going into November 5th.
You just say is everything they say is fundamental to a free society is that which they seek to undermine.
Exactly, and if it's not according to their political prescriptions, what they think they need to do, and let's look at that. They've grown the federal government to be 25% of our GDP, never that big. Most of the jobs they've created in terms of the practical things they talk about have been federal government jobs and jobs associated with places that they borrow and spend the money to promote, picking winners and losers. I mean, there's so many things with the open border, the economy, that people, I feel, but when it comes to how they more than subtly try to control the narrative, breaching all the fundamental freedoms we have, and do it from that perch of moral superiority, that gets me, and it's, I think, really going to be litigated in terms of who should be running this country over the next 4 years.
Yeah, for me, it's just sheer arrogance, the way that they act and all their policies. But, hey, I wanted to ask you, is the October surprise, do you think, the polling? I mean, Kamala Harris's previous 5-point lead is evaporating. And if you look at Minnesota, so before Kamala Harris put Walz on the ticket, she had a 10-point lead. She put him on the ticket, then it dropped to a 5, and now it's at a 4-point lead.
Didn't know that particular poll, but if that's Minnesotans, which would be a safe blue state, probably know what their governor is like. And he'd be one of the most liberal out there among governors, and that means that his real policies haven't been resonating as well. And I think you've seen they levitated after they got rid of Biden. There's no doubt about it. I think they rose 5 to 7% into their full potential in down ballot races and in the swing states especially. Now that's dissipating because we're getting a good look at Kamala and her knucklehead partner, because can those two actually be running the free world? Do you have any confidence that that's going to work? And, of course, they try to malign Trump. Look at his record pre-COVID. I think folks are really calculating it that simply, and we're seeing what she's about. When I served with her 2 years in the Senate, the first year when she wasn't running, no one remembers what she did as a senator. I was legislatively involved as a freshman Senate office then, and I don't ever recall her being out there on any significant discussion on policy, and that's showing now that she's on full display.
Yeah, she was just trying to be the lead antagonist in moments like the Kavanaugh confirmation hearing to get her bona fides to run for president. I mean, that was her whole play, and here we are. I wanted since we last spoke with you, Logansport, Indiana, has come to our attention, like Springfield, Ohio, and Charleroi, Pennsylvania, and Whitewater, Wisconsin, and so many other small communities, as a community that is currently being beset by I don't know, a combination of people here illegally and perhaps people here legally, but under TPS, but perhaps dubiously. What do you know about what's going on in Logansport, and what would you do about that situation as governor?
Well, these are all places, too, where it's been legal immigration, which for Biden and Harris, that would mean making exceptions for countries like Haiti, like Venezuela,
right,
like Cuba and other places. And then Logansport is a community somewhere around 15,000 people in a county that would maybe be double that or so. And imagine having even 500 immigrants coming in, swamping your local resources. So those are things that even when it comes to the legal side of immigration, which many would think that needs to be orderly based upon a completely secure border, not making exceptions so you can talk about legal immigration, or not all of a sudden enforcing the border when Harris was a czar that had never visited the border and you had all the illegal crossings. These are just some of the repercussions of a chaotic border that was in great shape pre-Biden-Harris, and now we got all the consequences from it, including Logansport's and Springfield's across the country. And that's going to play out over a long period of time. As governor, you'd have to push back on that. Do not drop people into your state if you're not going to help resource it, or if it's got a poor foundation in the first place. And that's what we're up against in places across the country.
Well, the other thing with it, I mean, are you oriented to, sort of mimic Greg Abbott? Because I've got a list of wealthy suburbs around Chicagoland I could give you if you want to send people who are in this country illegally being invited into this country, or, like I said, under sort of dubious circumstances with temporary protected status that isn't temporary. I mean, that sort of thing, it seems to me, needs to be addressed straight away. I don't know why we can't go back to the way that it used to be with, first of all, legal. Secondly, part of that legal process is making sure that you have a family or an associate that will vouch for you, that has the resources to put you up, so that if you're going to be here legally, then you have some sort of backstop while you assimilate and get integrated into a particular community.
All of that is sensible. Everything they wanted to do, let's be clear about it, whether it's TPS as a technicality that is maybe barely legal, but it isn't practically, that's going to all be litigated, and they're going to lose on that argument, because there is no place that can stand that kind of influx. And the fact that it's based upon a completely unsecured border, not to mention our northern border as well, is not going to work. And hopefully this all gets litigated clearly, because it is impacting almost all states. You'll have some blue states and governors that are trying to say, well, it's okay. But even remember the mayor of Chicago, mayor of New York City, some of the governors around the country that finally have said we can't handle it. And that, again, is something that everyone has been impacted by it, and hopefully they'll show up at the voting booth here in front of us.
He is Senator Mike Braun, Republican senator from Indiana, soon to be the Republican governor of Indiana. To get involved, support his candidacy in the last few weeks, MikeBraunForIndiana.com, B-R-A-U-N, MikeBraunForIndiana.com. Senator Braun, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
For anyone with everyday aches and pains, I've got a question. What are you missing out on? Probably a lot. So let me tell you about Relief Factor. Relief Factor is a drug-free daily supplement that helps your body fight pain naturally. It doesn't just mask pain, it helps reduce or even eliminate it. In about 3 weeks, you'll discover what it's like to feel better. Go to relieffactor.com or call 1-800-4RELIEF and save on your first order. That's 1-800-4RELIEF.
With Progressive, you get more than savings. You get access to us through our mobile app, online chat, or by phone.
Oh, I see what you're doing here, Jamie. Giving me